Lauren Hendelis grew up at Congregation Beth Israel, along with her sister Tori and their brother Neil, who is under the weather a little bit tonight. And so when Lauren called a couple weeks ago, and she is the daughter of Jay and Irene Rosenblum, and her sister Tori and brother-in-law Michael are here as well tonight. And they were among some of the first families that I met, because Lauren was in the first confirmation class that I taught at Congregation Beth Israel in 2003, which was a couple of years ago. And we only had 3 kids in confirmation that year. And so I got to know all of them really well. And Lauren was one of them. So when she called me a few weeks ago and said, would Congregation Beth Israel like to partner up with Yesh Tikva, which is an international organization for infertility awareness that sponsors tonight, which is called Infertility Awareness Shabbat, throughout the world, North America, I think specifically, but that's a big part of the world. There are well over 200 congregations participating tonight across the universe in Infertility Awareness Shabbat. It is a very, very important issue, and I was not aware of the depth to which the organized Jewish world has taken this cause so seriously. There's a local organization that Lauren will be talking about called Fruitful that she is part of. But without a long introduction, I just want to say this is one of those Kvel moments. We got to see the other side of a refuah shlema for our good friend David, and we get to see one of our former B'nai Mitzvah and confirmands who is now an adult and a mommy herself, ready to send her firstborn to the Channon preschool, like every good Jew should. And she's going to be speaking a little bit about her story. And then after her Devar Torah, because there's a lot of Torah that she's going to teach us tonight, she and I will sit down for a few minutes and have some follow-up conversation. So, Lauren, it is so, so nice to have you here and have your family here as well. I have extra water for you. Okay, there's some right there for you, just like your... Take your time.
Okay.
Try to enjoy it. It's really beautiful. Okay. Finish Kleenex under there.
Okay, thank you. Picture this. It's Rosh Hashanah. A woman smiles as she walks up to the greeters at the double doors, down the aisle toward the bima, and around the corner of a pew. Each step is a reminder of where she's been this past year. Each step a physical journey, an emotional climb with ups and downs, twists and turns. You can't see her pain because she hides it behind her positive, helpful, hardworking persona. She weathers it well, but today, it overtakes her. Months of consultations, blood tests, a miscarriage, medicated cycles, almosts, and all at once, she breaks. She's sitting next to her husband in synagogue, sobbing as she begs, makes deals, bargains with God. She's been doing whatever it takes, tapping every resource she has, paying outrageous medical bills, going to the mikvah. And now, heartbroken open, she prays, God, please hear my prayer. Please bless me with a child. This was my story at Rosh Hashanah 2 years ago, and this may be your story too. It's the story of Hannah, whom the Torah lauds as the creator of pure soul-bearing prayer. In fact, the rabbis of the Talmud honor this form of prayer above all. A woman bearing it all in public, exposing deep desperation until all she can do is collapse and weep and whisper in the temple. I never imagined I would be there. My parents said I could be anything I wanted to be when I grew up, and if I worked at it. And for the most part, they were right. I became a journalist, a successful businesswoman, a homeowner, a wife, just not yet a mommy. And trust me, I worked hard at it. My husband and I practiced a lot. I put my mind, body, and financial resources on this goal. And yet there I was, struggling to become a mother. So after several unfruitful months following that Rosh Hashanah, my husband and I consulted a fertility specialist. After all of the tests, she gave us the most frustrating diagnosis of all: unexplained infertility. She said we were the picture of health. She saw no issues. I was ovulating regularly, my eggs were good, my fallopian tubes were open, and my husband passed every test swimmingly. There was just no explanation. My doctor suggested intrauterine insemination, IUI. I was hopeful, but overwhelmed. I needed information. I needed comfort. I needed to know I was not alone. So I turned to a resource I've come to know quite well, Rabbi Google. No offense, Rabbi Khan. I typed into the search bar, unexplained infertility in Jews. Yeshtikva.org popped up, and I clicked on it. Yeshtikva, based in Los Angeles, has two primary goals. One, to provide resources and tools to those struggling with infertility. And two, to raise awareness of infertility throughout the Jewish community. I started reading about how pervasive fertility challenges are in the Jewish community. A staggering 1 in 8 couples struggle to get pregnant. The numbers are even higher for Jews, according to the National Jewish Population Survey. How did I not know this before? Why was no one talking about this? So now I am. I'm talking about this on behalf of every person who has dealt with or is dealing with infertility or pregnancy loss. And here's what I've discovered. The more we talk about this, the more others share their stories too. They feel less alone, and quite frankly, so do I. One of the hardest parts of a fertility journey is the crippling isolation. Isolation that can affect your work, your finances, your mental health, your marriage and family relationships, your friendships. I mean, to be honest, at times it was really hard to be around expecting women or new babies. The fertility journey can have an effect on your joy in life. It is all-consuming. And by the way, the women aren't the only ones experiencing this. Their partners feel the same desperation of wanting a child and the frustration of it not happening. My husband changed aspects of his lifestyle to boost fertility, and he stayed up late Googling for answers too. Why are these fertility drugs making my wife nuts? But in all seriousness, there's a helplessness that men and partners feel when all they can do is just stand by and be supportive while the woman deals with the physical issues as well as the emotional pain. For way too many people in the Jewish community, women and men, it is a silent, secret, and sometimes shameful struggle. And why shame? After all, this is so common. Well, let's look back into the book of Genesis. The first commandment of the Torah is be fruitful and multiply. It's not keep the Sabbath. It's not don't steal. It's not you should have 2 sinks, one for meat and one for dairy. The first words addressed by God to human beings are make babies, be fruitful and multiply. So what can the Jewish community do about this? You'd imagine with such a pervasive problem, there would be resources and support groups and major initiatives created for all of the Jewish men and women experiencing the financial, emotional, and spiritual struggles of infertility. What is the Jewish community's response to this? Up to now, not a whole lot. But let's go back to the Torah for a minute, because perhaps the narratives can provide guidance on how we can cut through the crippling isolation. So we already talked about Hannah, who went to the temple and prayed. She essentially made a bargain with God and said, look, if you give me a child, I'm going to enroll him in Jewish preschool and send him to Jewish summer camp and make sure he's involved with youth group and Hebrew High and all of the Jewish programs so he can grow up to help the Jewish community. And what happened? The high priest told her she was going to have a child, and she had Samuel. And then we have Sarah, who challenges God and says, hey, miracle maker, if you're so good, try helping a 90-year-old postmenopausal woman get pregnant. To which God's messenger says, challenge accepted. By next year, you'll have a son. And sure enough, she and Abraham did. So you can imagine, I'm Googling like crazy, and I'm reading all of this, and I say to myself, there seems to be a formula here. Ask God, pray, bargain, challenge, and the result, a child. So I tried it. I'm lying there in the doctor's office as the nurse is about to start the procedure. She tells me to relax, so I pray. For the requisite 20 minutes lying still, hoping for fertilization, I pray. The next 3, 4, 5 days, hoping for implantation, I pray. On my acupuncturist table, with needles all over me to help things flow, I pray. 2 weeks later, as the nurse is drawing blood to check if I'm pregnant, oh, did I pray. I bargained like Hannah. I made a silent deal to God. If this happens, I promise I'll be a more committed Jew. I challenged like Sarah. Go ahead, God, and explain the unexplained. Make a divine miracle for me. While performing rituals like immersing in the mikvah and baking challah before Shabbat, I prayed. Please, God, hear me. I know I will be a great mother. I have so much love to give. The result? The nurse called me to tell me the procedure did not work. I was crushed. I felt desperation, profound sadness, and isolation. So I went back to Rabbi Google. Maybe there was more to the formula than just pleading and praying. Turns out, for both Hannah and Sarah, prayer wasn't enough. There were people there witnessing, an angel, a priest, a messenger, saying out loud to them, you will have a child. And perhaps that is our Jewish communal role, to stand there alongside someone and say, if you want to have a child, we're going to help make that happen. The Jewish community is known for doing this. Historically, we galvanize around issues to solve problems through advocacy, activism, and of course, fundraising. It's incredible what we can accomplish working together. As a community, we need to help those who can't afford the exorbitant out-of-pocket costs for multiple rounds of fertility treatments or adoption or surrogacy fees. But money is not the sole answer to combating the isolation and despair infertile couples feel. As a community, we need to be more sensitive. Even though you have the best intentions, don't ask newlyweds when they're going to make a baby or if a couple is going to have more children. Don't complain that your house is overflowing with toys and you stepped on a Lego this morning, because there are people who would give anything to fill their house with Legos. And please, if you know a couple is trying, don't offer them unsolicited advice or tell them to just relax and it'll happen. Together, we need to embrace people at a most vulnerable moment in their lives. Think of the impact this would have on affiliation and engagement. Imagine how people would feel connected and grateful to a community that holds you at a time of such great need. Back in Genesis, near the part where we receive the commandment to be fruitful and multiply, we also hear that it's not good for humans to be alone, that we need an Ezer Kenegdo, someone to help us to be successful, that we need to feel the community with us, by our side. Throughout my infertility journey, I was extremely private about it, and I didn't have many witnesses. But my husband was my Ezer Kenegdo, who constantly assured me that we were going to be okay, and we were going to have a child. And he was right. We are truly blessed that our second round of IUI worked, and we welcomed a beautiful baby boy to the world 16 months ago. We don't take for granted for a second the fact that we have been given such a precious gift. But there are so many future Jewish parents who need our help. Let's remove the pressure we imply in that first commandment to be fruitful and multiply, and instead focus on being the Ezer Kenegdo, the partner reaching out to help someone in isolation. There are a few ways you can do that. First, if you have an infertility story of your own, share it. The more we talk about this, the less taboo it becomes. Secondly, know that there are support groups available. I am proud to be on the board of a local organization called Fruitful, which is a Jewish support group for those who are waiting for their miracle. We provide community, education, and emotional support to women and men. There are other resources like our rabbis and Yesh Tikvah and Jewish Free Loan available to help. Third, consider giving financial support, because let's be real. If one can't afford to have a child, then the emotional, spiritual, and informational resources certainly won't solve the problem either. And lastly, as this week's Torah portion, Tazria, reminds us, let's prevent stigma from being attached to infertility. Let's widen our own community for those who are struggling to build their families and welcome them with open arms. If infertility affects 1 in 8 couples, I promise you know someone dealing with this, whether they've made it public or not. So if you're aware of their challenges, the best thing you can do is be their Ezer Kenegdo. Listen when they speak, be a shoulder to cry on if need be, validate whatever feelings or reactions they might have, and remind them you are not alone. Thank you. Shabbat.
Wow. Better than the second time. Okay, let's sit down for a second. Sorry. All the other microphones are gone, and I wanted to make sure that the microphone was working, because we're, of course, going to have this. It's being. I can put that over here for you.
Okay.
It's on YouTube now. For on Tuesday, it'll be on YouTube so that all your friends can see it, and if anyone was watching live tonight, they got to see it too. But that's one of the great gifts of this other thing. So first of all. You are, Hannah would be very proud of you. It's a tradition that in Torah, only 9% of the names in the Torah, only 9, are women. And most of them are called the daughter of, the mother of, the sister of. They don't even have a name, which is another reason that we know the Torah was written by men, for men. But nonetheless, Hannah is one of the few, and as you said, very powerful exemplars of, it sounds trite to say courage. It's really about what kavanah means, what intentional, mindful prayer is all about. You know, people who do mindfulness now, this is the kind of stuff that Hannah invented. I wanted to know, because I want to talk about Yesh Tikva for a second, because your story mentions it, but I think we need to know how incredible this organization is. Yeah. On your spiritual trajectory through this, what was missing, maybe, is the best way of saying it, from what you had learned up to then, and what did you learn as part of Yesh Tikva and from others, from your community? Because you've talked a lot about how the community helped raise you up, and women who are going through this, and men for Zev to give support. What was missing and what was added by being among other Hannah-like sources for you?
So I don't think I remembered learning those stories specifically. I mean, I remembered Sarah, of course, but I don't remember the stories of infertility, which are all throughout the Torah, and Yesh Tikva did that for me. It put in the forefront that there were at least 4 women who dealt with this in a major way and came through, and they did it with their faith intact and through God. And at that moment, I needed that, and that's what Yesh Tikva gave to me. And it was all through blog posts and prayer, and just, I was sitting there at my computer, like I said, and for me, that's what worked. That's what I needed in that moment.
So when I was in rabbinic school, they taught Bible as literature in one of our classes and talked about the motif of the barren woman, right? And like you said, at the end of each one of the barren women motifs, they would get pregnant and have usually not just babies, but like important ones, like Samuel in the case of Hannah, Samson in the case of his mom's, whose name we don't know, Isaac, and so on and so forth. Do you think that there's added like pressure on Max now? Not only because, you know, he's your kid and Zev's kid, but because he's your parents' grandson as well. But is there like an added, you took none of this for granted, and he's now gonna have to step up and get to beyond the Legos quickly?
So what we always say is he needs to be a mensch. So whatever that might mean, that's what we want him to become.
And do you think you're going to tell him this story about how he came to be?
Yeah, for sure. I think at the time I was so private. I would have never dreamed that I would be sitting up here talking about truly. Like, I was so kind of ashamed and private about it. But yeah, by the time he's old enough to understand this, I'm hoping the stigma will be removed, and this is a very normalized topic.
And I do want to get back to the Shonda piece of it, because that's almost as old as Hannah in the Bible. But can you just say a little bit more about Yesh Tikva and a little bit more about what you're doing locally? Because I think that those are really important resources. I will venture to guess that every person, that a lot of people in this room have children, grandchildren, nieces, sisters-in-law, sisters who are going through this currently.
Correct.
So, and they have no idea, as I didn't until we met a couple months ago. So can you talk about Yesh Tikva sort of nationally and what they're doing, and then sort of what's going on locally?
Yeah, so Yesh Tikva is based in LA, but they have experts all throughout the country who are helping women and men go through their infertility struggles. So they host like a virtual therapy session with a licensed therapist who is a Jewish woman who only specializes in this sort of thing.
It's so like a video conference?
Yep, and it's really great. Like, hundreds of people dial in every time that they host one. Like I said, they have lots of literature online. They host programs like this and really are trying to bring not just their own community within LA together, but like coast to coast. Australia's involved in this tonight. Like, major kind of networking going on to raise awareness and sensitivity, and that's really their goal. They're not giving out grants, which is also an important piece, but they want to focus on the sensitivity issue and the awareness issue. Right. So that's what they're doing. And then Fruitful here in town is also a small but mighty organization. where we're that hands-on, in person. Come to a support meeting in a home. It is private. It is calm. It is, all of us who can say, we get it. We've been there, or we're going through it with you. So we offer support groups for just the women right now, but the men can get together for coffee or drinks or golf or whatever it might be.
Have you made a couple friends through their group too?
Yeah, and they're here tonight too. And then we have educational events where we bring in doctors or acupuncturists or therapists to come and talk to us and educate us. And when you're seeing a fertility specialist, you only get so much time with them. They're doctors. They're going from room to room to room.
Right.
So to be able to have that resource, and they're an open book. You pick their brain for all night long, and that's a really incredible resource.
So it's like for all of our neurotic Jewish questions, you get as much time as you want, whereas doctors get annoyed with
for free,
which is even better. The last thing, then, I have 1,000 questions, but the last thing is this issue of Shonda comes up a lot. So the Jewish Family and Children's Services just had an event, a luncheon that we were at a couple weeks ago. Carol Seidberg actually chaired it, about mental illness, which is what I call a Shonda topic in the Jewish community. This obviously is a Shonda. Why do you think Jews feel such shame, or have up until now, about these types of sensitive topics, when really opening these things up, it relieves so much pressure from the spiritual pressure and emotional pressure, but what is it about us that makes it hard for us? Is it just the pressure on grandparents or great-grandparents to have offspring? Is it just this sort of expectation? Is it increasing, meaning 50 years ago there was many women experiencing infertility? What do you think, just from your spiritual, social sense of what you've been doing?
I think as a Jew, when you grow up, almost everything is family-centric, if not kid-centric. Right? So it starts with the bris, and then you have preschool graduation, and then you have bat mitzvah, and then you have confirmation, right? Everything is centered around children, and you have holidays, Simchas Torah, and there's children everywhere, and Passover, the kids are saying the Manishtana, everything has children. And when you're going through it, the holidays can be really, really challenging.
I can imagine.
But I think as a Jew, that's maybe why it becomes that much more difficult, that when you grow up, that's all you know. Everything is about family and children, and it's beautiful and it's wonderful, and I think that's how it should be. But, I think that's why there's that added pressure. And it's not just a Jewish issue. Everybody's dealing with this, but for Jews in particular, everything we do is so kid-centric.
Yeah, and I think also, in addition to that, there's this discomfort when something or someone is missing from the table, whether it's the thought of a child or someone who may have been in rehabilitation for substance abuse, or someone is having other emotional, mental health issues. We don't want to address it as it is. We just want to, the person, the secret is, where's that person at the table? Everyone's talking about it, but no one's talking about it. So I hope one of the things that you were able to provide tonight, I really hope that we were able to provide, is this has to be a conversation that we're comfortable having. First of all, since when did Jews get shy about talking about things? And I thought in your speech what you were able to do was to balance both that sort of spiritual arc from Hanukkah to you, but also open it up for conversation. So, Zev, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm going to. In addition to the great pride that you feel for Lauren and how amazing she is, what would be your takeaway for us tonight? And if you can just tell me, and then if you don't have to get up and shout.
I think what Lauren articulated was both of our sentiments, is that you should be more sensitive to your surroundings and don't make assumptions about people and their situation. It's not just with this particular issue, but everything that we go through in life. So, but in this particular issue, it's just, I think again, it's just to be sensitive about your surroundings and not to make assumptions about people.
Right. I think the takeaway that Zev is saying is not to make assumptions about people. As Jews, we tend to be in your face a little bit when you're young and married, when you're having kids, and when you're going to have your next kid. And we need to be sensitive that it's not that simple sometimes for some couples. 1 out of 8 generally, I would imagine the Jewish community, you said it was higher. And I'm as guilty of that as anyone. As a rabbi, it's like just part of my craziness. But I'm really, one of my takeaways from tonight is not to ask that question anymore. Not because I usually ask it to be obnoxious, but now I'm not going to ask it because there's this added component, which is sensitivity to what someone may be going through. And what you explained was really raw. Like that, for both of you, was a really raw experience. So I want to end this with two things. Number one, thank you. This was not, I'm sure, easy to do. And I know it was the first time talking about this publicly. So the honor of hosting you and having you as part of our community and having Max in the preschool in the fall is, I'm not kidding, Max is coming to the preschool because he's going to be a Nobel laureate at some point. And if you want that, you go to the Channon preschool. So thank you for that. But I also want to share some good news. We had a call this last week. We have an anonymous donor who is going to donate $10,000 to set up, matching it, or as I like to say, up to $10,000 for every every dollar of $10,000 that I'm able to raise, or we as a community are able to raise. So we're going to have a $20,000 fund set up at CBI. Straight tzedakah, 100% will go to women who need the funds for testing, for all of those uncovered expenses. And we'd really like to grow this fund. So the amazing thing is that as we're sharing this story and creating some of that other energy around there, we know how desperately expensive this process is along the spectrum. So we already have 10,000. We're going to have another 10,000 very soon, and we're going to grow it. And so Lauren has agreed to work on a committee with Rabbi Mason Barkin and with me to figure out some of the logistics of how we'll be able to donate money on behalf of the congregation to women who need it, couples who need it for testing and for all the different things that they go through. So that will be sent out to everyone in the congregation very soon, and we'll announce it at the high holidays, because my goal is by the high holidays to have the full amount raised. So we have half of it there. And then we'll figure out how to start giving out money to make babies. Because I think if you can't give away money to make babies, you shouldn't be in the Jewish business. And so I want you to know that you guys have planted an amazing seed for the community. And I know that Rabbi Mason Barkin spoke at a fruitful event already, or did something?
She attended one, yeah.
Great. So everybody needs to go learn about Yesh Tikvah, learn about the story of Hannah, learn about how real, and find some, I hope, strength out of Lauren's strength, and then know as a community that we're going to start playing a very actively participatory role in helping these babies. Because you're right, it's good for the Jews. And what's good for the Jews is good for the world. Don't forget it. And I'm so grateful to you. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.